The Duality Rift. Heroes in the Rift of Worlds Part 1. The Game, Chapter 1. Heroes in the Rift of Worlds. The rift shimmered with an unnatural light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Elliot stared at it, his breath caught between awe and dread.
Around him, the world was still, a stark contrast to the swirling chaos that the rift seemed to promise.
The air was thick with tension, as if reality itself was holding its breath. "Elliot, don't just stand there!" Riley's voice snapped him out of his trance. She was crouched by a boulder, her face smeared with dirt, her eyes wide with the kind of fear that begged for action. "It's growing. We don't have time to think about this." Elliot nodded, though his hands trembled as he gripped the hilt of the makeshift staff they'd carved together years ago. What had started as a game, an innocent escape from their dull, small-town lives, had now become something horrifyingly real. He didn't want to move, didn't want to face the truth that lay beyond the rift, but Riley was right. They had no choice. Behind him, Sam stood tall, his usual smirk replaced with a grim line. The shadow of the rift played tricks on his face, giving him the fleeting resemblance of his counterpart, Chaos King. "You know," Sam said, his voice low but steady, "I never thought I'd see it up close. It's alive." "Alive and deadly," Maya cut in, her voice tight. She was already holding the glowing amulet that Aurora, her counterpart, had entrusted to her during their last encounter. The amulet pulsed in rhythm with the rift, as if it too felt the pull of the other dimension. Elliot took a shaky step forward, and the ground beneath his feet shifted. The grass was no longer grass. It was a patchwork of their world and the chaotic expanse of the superpowered dimension. Jagged edges of steel jutted out of the earth, glinting in the strange light. Trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches reaching like claws toward the sky. "Do you feel that?" Maya whispered, her gaze fixed on the rift. "It's not just growing, it's calling." Elliot felt it too, a low hum in his bones, a pull in his chest.
It was as if the rift knew him, knew all of them, and was beckoning them closer. Suddenly, the ground shook.
The rift erupted in a burst of light, and from its depths emerged a figure, tall, cloaked in darkness, with eyes that burned like embers. Chaos King. His presence was a storm contained within a single being. Shadows coiled around him, whispering promises of destruction. "Sam!" Riley hissed, glancing at him. "Tell me that's not you." Sam didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Chaos King, his jaw clenched. The resemblance was uncanny. It was as if the Chaos King had stepped out of their imaginations and into reality, but twisted, darker, more dangerous. "You've played your games," Chaos King said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the air.
"But now the game is over. This world, your world, is mine." "No!" Elliot's voice rang out, surprising even himself. He stepped forward, raising his staff. "This isn't your world. It's ours, and we won't let you destroy it." Chaos King tilted his head, a mockery of curiosity. "Starfire," he said, the name dripping with disdain. "Always the hero, always the fool." The words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they were. Elliot had created Starfire to be everything he wasn't: brave, confident, unshakable. But now, facing Chaos King, he felt none of those things. He was just Elliot, a scared teenager with a wooden staff. "Elliot," Maya said softly, stepping beside him. "You don't have to do this alone." Her words grounded him. He looked at her, then at Riley and Sam. They were his friends, his family. They had started this together, and they would end it together. Chaos King laughed, a sound that seemed to make the air itself shudder. "How touching," he said. "But sentiment won't save you." With a flick of his hand, the shadows surged forward, a tidal wave of darkness. Elliot barely had time to react. He raised his staff, and light burst from its tip, meeting the shadows head-on. The impact sent him stumbling backward, but he held his ground. Behind him, Riley unsheathed her daggers, Echo Blade's weapons, sharp and gleaming. She moved with precision, slicing through tendrils of shadow as they reached for her. Sam, despite his resemblance to Chaos King, fought with a ferocity that was all his own. And Maya, glowing with the light of Aurora's amulet, stood at the center, a beacon of hope in the chaos. The battle was a blur of light and shadow, of chaos and order. The rift pulsed with each clash, its energy feeding the storm. Elliot felt the weight of it all, their world, the other world, the lives caught in between. But he also felt something else, the bond they shared. It was more than friendship. It was a connection that transcended worlds, a force stronger than Chaos King's shadows.
As the battle raged on, Elliot caught Chaos King's gaze.
For a moment, he saw something in those burning eyes. Something familiar.
Fear. Doubt.
And then he realized Chaos King wasn't just a villain. He was a part of them, a manifestation of their darkest fears and insecurities. "Sam!" Elliot shouted over the roar of the battle. "You have to reach him. He's you." Sam hesitated, his movements faltering. "What are you talking about?" "Chaos King," Elliot said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him.
"He's the part of you that you're afraid to face. You have to face him or we'll never win." Sam's eyes widened, but he nodded. He stepped forward, lowering his weapon.
Chaos King paused, his shadows retreating slightly.
"What are you doing?" Riley demanded.
"He'll kill you!" "No," Sam said, his voice quiet but firm.
"He won't." He looked Chaos King in the eye and said, "You're not my enemy. You're me, and I'm not afraid of you." The shadows trembled, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath.
Then, with a deafening roar, the rift began to collapse, pulling Chaos King and his shadows with it. The light grew brighter and brighter until it consumed everything. When the light faded, the rift was gone. The world was still again, but it was different, changed. The scars of the battle remained, but so did the bond they had forged. Elliot looked at his friends, his family, and smiled. "We did it," he said. For the first time, he truly believed it. Chapter 2. Friends in the Ordinary World. The forest was alive with the sound of laughter, branches snapping underfoot, and the occasional clatter of a makeshift weapon against a tree. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the canopy, painting golden streaks across the dirt path. To anyone else, it might have seemed like an ordinary group of teens goofing off in the woods, but to Elliot and his friends, this was their battleground.
"Stop monologuing and fight me already, Chaos King!" Riley shouted, twirling her wooden daggers with a theatrical flourish.
She leapt onto a fallen log, her red scarf trailing behind her like a warrior's cape. Sam grinned from his self-proclaimed throne, an old tree stump covered with moss. His black hoodie was pulled up over his head, giving him the air of a mischievous villain, though the stick he waved like a scepter did little to sell the intimidation factor.
"Patience, Echo Blade," he said, his voice dripping with exaggerated menace. "A true villain savors the moment before their victory." "Victory?" Maya's voice rang out as she stepped into the clearing, clutching a homemade staff adorned with colorful ribbons and glitter. "You haven't won a single battle this week, Sam." "First of all, it's Chaos King when we're in character," Sam corrected, wagging his stick at her. "And second, I've been going easy on you. Chaos is merciful after all." Maya rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her amusement. "Sure you have. And I'm a real healer." She tapped the end of her staff on the ground, releasing a small puff of glitter that caught the sunlight.
"Aurora is here to restore balance, as always." Elliot watched from a few feet away, leaning against a tree with his sketchbook balanced on his knee. He was scribbling furiously, trying to capture the scene before him. Riley perched mid-battle stance, Sam looking impossibly smug, and Maya spinning her glittery staff like it was a sacred artifact.
"You're supposed to be Starfire, Elliot," Riley called out, breaking his concentration. "Get over here and save the day already." Elliot sighed, closing his sketchbook. "You don't really need me, you've got him surrounded." "That's not the point," Riley replied, gesturing with one of her daggers. "What's the fun of having a hero if he just stands around?" "Maybe Starfire's thinking," Elliot said, his tone defensive but playful. "Not every fight has to end with someone swinging a stick." Sam snorted. "Says the guy who created a hero with unstoppable light powers. Thinking doesn't win battles, Elliot." Elliot crossed the clearing to join them, adjusting the bright yellow scarf wrapped around his neck.
It was his only attempt at a costume, a stark contrast to the elaborate touches the others had added to theirs. He picked up his staff, which had fallen into the grass during one of their earlier skirmishes.
"Fine," he said, adopting his best heroic stance. "Starfire has arrived to defeat Chaos King and save the realm of—" He paused, racking his brain. "The Enchanted Forest?" Riley groaned.
"You need to work on your improv." "Cut him some slack," Maya said with a grin.
"At least he's trying." "Trying?" Sam barked a laugh. "Please, Chaos King doesn't tremble before mediocre heroes." Elliot stepped closer, raising his staff. Maybe not, but what about this? He swung the staff in a wide arc, sending a spray of dirt toward Sam's legs. Sam yelped and jumped back, but the rest of the group burst into laughter. Cheap move, Sam said, brushing dirt off his jeans. I demand a rematch. Fine, Elliot said, planting his staff in the ground. But first, the Great Starfire needs to strategize. Strategize all you want, Sam said, settling back onto his mossy throne. Chaos doesn't wait forever. The group fell into a natural rhythm, teasing and laughing as they planned their next battle. It was a game they'd played for years, ever since they were kids with too much energy and too little to do in their quiet town. Over time, their characters had grown into elaborate personas, each reflecting a little piece of who they were, or who they wanted to be. Riley's Echo Blade was bold and fearless, a stark contrast to the quiet girl who preferred books over people most of the time. Sam's Chaos King allowed him to lean into his prankster tendencies without judgment. Maya's Aurora was nurturing and kind, a mirror of the way she always seemed to keep the group together. And Elliot? Well, Starfire was everything he wasn't. Confident, brave, and unyielding in the face of danger. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Maya spoke up. You guys ever think about what it'd be like if this was real? Sam snorted. What, like actual heroes and villains? Pretty sure I'd win. I mean it, Maya said, her voice thoughtful. What if we really had these powers? What if we had to fight for real? Riley hopped off the log, landing lightly on her feet. We'd kick ass, obviously. Maybe, Elliot said quietly, looking at the golden light that filtered through the trees. But real battles? Real heroes. It's not all fun and games. The group fell silent for a moment, the weight of Elliot's words settling over them like the shadows of the trees. But the heaviness didn't last long. Sam, true to form, broke the silence with a dramatic wave of his scepter. Enough talk of real battles, he declared. Chaos King decrees that this day shall end in victory for Chaos. Maya rolled her eyes. Not if Aurora has anything to say about it. Riley smirked, twirling her daggers. Let's see how you handle Echo Blade. And just like that, the game was back on. Elliot smiled as he watched his friends charge into the imaginary fray. For now, this was their world, a place where heroes and villains clashed, but no one truly lost. A place where they could be anything they wanted to be. But somewhere deep in his chest, he felt a strange unease, as though their words about real battles were more than just talk. Shaking the thought away, he raised his staff and ran to join the fight. Chapter 3. Enter the Superpowered World. The air in Dimension B was heavy, electric, and alive with chaos. The sky, a swirling storm of crimson and ash, stretched endlessly, fractured by jagged cracks of light that bled into nothingness. Reality itself seemed fragile, a brittle shell teetering on the edge of collapse. Below the fractured sky, a city that once stood proud now lay in ruins. Towering skyscrapers, warped and twisted, jutted into the storm like broken teeth. The streets were battlegrounds, littered with debris, abandoned vehicles, and the occasional flicker of neon signs struggling against the darkness. At the heart of it all stood Chaos King. Sam's counterpart towered atop a spiraling obsidian monument of his own creation, the jagged structure pulsing with an unnatural energy. Shadows coiled around him like living creatures, writhing and whispering as he surveyed the battlefield with burning, ember-like eyes. In his hands, he held a sleek, metallic device, his latest creation, an experimental weapon designed to bend space-time itself. Citizens of the Rift! Chaos King's voice boomed across the city, distorted and laced with malice. Today marks the beginning of a new era, an era where order crumbles and chaos reigns supreme. Below him, a violent battle raged between the heroes and his loyal faction of villains. Starfire, radiant and defiant, led the charge, his golden armor gleaming against the shadows that pressed in from all sides. He wielded a staff of light, its brilliance cutting through the darkness with each swing. "Chaos King!" Starfire shouted, his voice carrying above the din of battle. "You've gone too far! Put down the weapon before you destroy everything!" Chaos King laughed, the sound reverberating like thunder. "Destroy? No, dear Starfire. I'm not destroying, I'm remaking. I'm liberating this world from its tired notions of balance and control." Aurora,
her silver robes flowing as if caught in an eternal breeze, raised her hands, summoning a wave of healing energy that cascaded over the injured heroes around her.
"You're tampering with forces you don't understand," she called out. Her voice was steady, calm, but tinged with urgency. "If you destabilize the rift, you won't just destroy this dimension, you'll destroy both." Chaos King smirked, his ember eyes narrowing. "Is that a threat, Aurora? Or a plea?" Echo Blade darted through the shadows, her movements fluid and precise. She emerged beside Starfire, her twin blades glowing faintly in the dim light. "Enough talk," she muttered, her tone sharp. "He's not going to listen." "You wound me, Echo Blade," Chaos King said, mockingly placing a hand over his chest. "I'm always listening, I just don't care." Without warning, he pressed a button on the device. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and deeper until it vibrated in their very bones. The cracks in the sky pulsed, expanding, their jagged edges flaring with unnatural light. The ground beneath their feet trembled, sending chunks of asphalt and stone tumbling into the voids opening around them. "Starfire!" Aurora shouted, her voice edged with panic. "He's activated it." "I see it," Starfire replied, tightening his grip on his staff. "We need to stop him before—" Before he could finish, the weapon unleashed a burst of energy. A shockwave rippled outward, distorting everything it touched. Buildings bent and folded like paper, their shapes twisting into impossible angles. The heroes and villains alike were thrown to the ground as gravity itself seemed to falter. In the chaos, Echo Blade sprang into action. "I'll get the device!" she shouted, sprinting toward Chaos King's perch. Shadows lashed out at her, but she moved with precision, her blades cutting through the tendrils like silk. "Cover her," Starfire ordered, stepping forward to unleash a beam of light from his staff. It collided with Chaos King's defenses, sending a cascade of sparks raining down. Chaos King sneered, raising his free hand to summon a wall of dark energy that absorbed the blast. "Pathetic," he hissed. "You still cling to your pitiful light, thinking it can outshine the inevitable." Aurora knelt on the fractured ground, her hands glowing as she stabilized the collapsing terrain beneath them. "I can't hold this together much longer," she warned, sweat beading on her brow. "You won't have to," Starfire said, determination hardening his voice. He charged toward the monument, leaping over fissures and debris, his staff blazing brighter with each step. Chaos King stepped back, his ember eyes narrowing as Starfire closed the gap. "You think you can stop me?" he growled, his voice laced with fury. "This world was already broken. I'm just finishing the job." Starfire didn't reply. He swung his staff with all his strength, the light arcing like a comet. Chaos King blocked the strike with the device, the collision sending out another shockwave. The weapon sputtered and sparked, its glow flickering erratically. Chaos King's confident facade cracked for a moment, his eyes darting to the unstable device. "Now!" Echo Blade shouted, leaping onto the monument. She slashed at the weapon, severing the connection between it and Chaos King's grip. The device tumbled to the ground, landing with a heavy thud. Chaos King roared, his shadows flaring wildly as he tried to reach for it. Starfire planted his staff into the ground, unleashing a barrier of light that forced Chaos King back. "Aurora, can you neutralize it?" he called out. Aurora hesitated, her eyes fixed on the device. I can try." She sprinted forward, her hands glowing with a soft silver light. Kneeling beside the device, she placed her palms on its surface. The energy within it surged, fighting against her efforts, but she held firm, her expression resolute. The ground beneath them continued to quake, the cracks in the sky widening. Chaos King's shadows recoiled, their strength faltering. "No!" he bellowed, his voice raw with desperation. "You don't understand what you're doing. Without chaos, there's nothing." "There's balance," Starfire replied, his voice steady. "Something you'll never understand." Aurora let out a sharp cry as the device emitted one final burst of light, then fell silent. The cracks in the sky began to mend, the distorted terrain slowly stabilizing. Chaos King staggered, his ember eyes dimming as the shadows around him dissolved. "You think you've won," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "But chaos doesn't die. It waits." And with that, he vanished, leaving the heroes standing in the ruins of the battlefield, the weight of their victory tempered by the knowledge that the fight was far from over.